Sometimes ADHD is misunderstood just as being overly energetic or distracted, but it is so much more than that. And in fact, it's one of the most common neurodivergent conditions in schools today. And that's why in this episode, I'm diving into how ADHD affects students in the classroom, why it's often mistaken for misbehaviour, and most importantly, how you as a teacher can support these learners to truly thrive. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Miss Estruch Teach Tell, your weekly podcast full of tips, strategies, and insights for streamlining your teaching workload and creating a more inclusive environment in your classroom. I'm your host, Miss Estruch, or Katie, and today's episode, we are concluding our SEND mini-series, and this time it's a deep dive into supporting students with ADHD in your classroom. If you missed the previous two episodes, you've missed the one on dyslexia and autism spectrum condition. I highly recommend you go back, listen to those, because those episodes are packed with practical strategies and resources to help your students. But today we are exploring what ADHD is, how it impacts learning and behaviour, and crucially, how you can adapt your teaching and classroom environment to help these students succeed. Plus, stay tuned until the end for the resource roundup in which I have a freebie for you. Right, let's get into the main content then. So what is ADHD? So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and it's a neurodevelopmental condition affecting attention, impulse control, and activity levels. It's actually estimated that around 3 to 5% of children in the UK have ADHD, meaning you are likely to have at least one or two students with ADHD in every classroom, whether they are diagnosed and aware of it or not. So common myths are often that ADHD just means someone that is really hyper and badly behaved often, but it isn't that. It's to do with differences in their brain structure and function, which means that they perceive things differently and do behave differently, but it's not something that they are actively in control of and misbehaving. So a few more facts that I wanted to do, because as a teacher, I'd say in the last 4 to 5 years, I've seen so many more of my students saying to me that they are going to get an ADHD assessment, or that they have had the assessment, it's come back that they have ADHD, or that they think they have ADHD, but there's such a long waiting list that they aren't going to have the assessment. So I wanted to see, how does my experience translate and reflect in terms of the whole nation? Is it just my school? Is it more widespread across the country? And I found a study, it's a bit outdated now, but UCL did do a study on this. And what they found was, and this is just among boys, that boys aged 10 to 16, the prevalence of diagnosed ADHD rose from 1.4% in the year 2000 to 3.5% in 2018. And they also found something similar for men aged 18 to 29, which obviously 18-year-olds will be in secondary school still, but beyond that, they're not. And they actually found a 20-fold increase. So from 0.01% to 0.56%. In terms of more recent data, what I did actually find was that there's also been a significant increase in not just the ADHD diagnosis, but also prescriptions in the UK from 2020 onwards. And between July and September 2022, approximately 170,000 individuals were prescribed with at least one ADHD medication, which is a 20.4 increase from the same period in 2021. So there is clearly an increase in awareness, diagnosis, and treatment. So the likelihood is you may not have had anyone in your class that would realise or was diagnosed with ADHD 5-10 years ago, whereas now you might be seeing more and more of it in your classes, and it's probably because of the increased awareness and assessment rates. So let's then go on to how ADHD presents in the classroom in a student. So one key thing could be inattention. So a student that is struggling to focus, they become easily distracted or might zone out mid-task. Number two could be hyperactivity, and you might see this in behaviours like fidgeting or constantly moving or wanting to be stood up the whole time and not wanting to sit down, and they just want to stand up and walk around. It could be talking excessively as well. Number three, it could be impulsivity. So just shouting out an answer when you've told people to not shout out, or constantly asking questions and interrupting or struggling to wait their turn. And then it could also be linked to emotional regulation. So students might experience frustration or outbursts when things don't go to plan or they don't get their own way. Now, beyond those more commonly recognized symptoms of ADHD of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity that I've just gone through, ADHD can manifest in less obvious ways as well. So it could be individuals are experiencing emotional dysregulation, leading to mood swings or heightened sensitivity to criticism, known as rejection sensitive dysphoria. And other subtle traits include time blindness, so difficulty perceiving that passage of time within a lesson. It might be intrusive thoughts, which could lead to them being distracted then as well. It might be sleep disturbances, which then means they're even more tired in your lessons. They might be struggling to stay awake. So looking at those more common presentations of ADHD in the classroom, along with these more subtle ones, is crucial for us understanding a student's experience of your classroom and lessons, and therefore also supporting them with succeeding and feeling comfortable in the classroom. Now, from that list, I have definitely seen students who had not had an ADHD diagnosis, but I'm sure they must have had ADHD. And I also had students who had an assessment and it came back that they did have ADHD. And the most common ones that I have seen, and I teach mainly GCSE and A-level students, are the wanting to stand up the whole time rather than sit down, and without even realising, they might have just stood up and started wandering around, and you're thinking, why have you just walked over there? What are you doing? And some of the time they haven't even realised that they've just got up mid-sentence while I was talking to the class and done that. And also the blurting out of answers, not being able to wait their turn, and emotional regulations when things don't go to plan, and then it's like, well, I thought we were going to do this now, I want to do this now, or you didn't get me to answer the question, and then it's just getting frustrated and annoyed. Those are some really common traits that I've seen. With my A-level students, it's more so that I've seen their struggle to organise their time. And my friend who's recently been diagnosed with ADHD, he's my age, but he said he really struggled in school and university. And since his diagnosis, he has been told this is linked to his ADHD. With deadlines, he was terrible at organising his time because of that concept that we said, the not necessarily having this perception of time. It's you perceive time differently. So if you've got a deadline that is 2 weeks until you have to hand this in, he said that he just couldn't find the drive to do something until it was due imminently. And that pressure was what he then needed to know, this is actually now currently due, I will have to do it. And that's how he's always lived his life. So he's struggled with time management, getting things done. He'd then do all-nighters, which then affects your sleep pattern, and then it means he gets all out of sync. And he's been told that is linked to his ADHD, and since he's now started taking medicine, he is far more able to plan ahead and not have that time urgency of a deadline to force him to suddenly do an all-nighter to get things done. So it's being aware of that when you're setting homeworks or tests. That might be how students feel, and you might then get frustrated thinking they're just cramming or they're making things more difficult. But if they are struggling with that, then perhaps it might be set them mini deadlines along the way. Say, I want to see from you this piece of work tomorrow and then this piece of work in 2 days, and that might help them to have a more structured revision plan with these mini deadlines that they're more able to understand and follow. So leading on from that is more challenges to think about that ADHD students might face in learning. And one of them that I was just addressing there, talking about my friend, was organisation and time management. So forgetting homework, losing resources, or arriving late to lessons. And I've seen this in students with ADHD that you need to actively help them to write down what the homework task is and make sure it's somewhere that it can't be on a scrap of paper that they're going to lose it. Or even like homework planners, I found students, they said, I'm just going to lose that though. So they found it better if they could write it down in their phone, or we then moved to Satchel 1, show my homework, and then parents can see it as well. So if the student has forgotten, then at least the parent can see, right, what's everything that's due for tomorrow? Let's sit down and get it done together. So it's making sure that if they're not going to remember, have you written it down somewhere that someone at home can access it and support them, or a form tutor can access it and support them during form time as well. Also, processing instructions. So they might find it difficult if you've got a whole long list of instructions in a practical, for example. Are there ways that you can break down the task into manageable chunks? So with a practical, maybe instead of having just a long page of everything to follow in the method, could it be separate it? So here are the first 3 tasks you need to do to set up your equipment. And the next step, here are the next 3 tasks you need to do this part of the practical, and so on. So are there ways that you can chunk it, and it can be visually chunked into maybe this coloured box, this coloured box, with the numbered step stills to try and make it more manageable and less overwhelming, so it's easier to process those instructions without getting distracted partway through. And then the next big one is self-esteem. It is so common for ADHD students to feel misunderstood or labelled as naughty. And that can be so frustrating if they're there thinking, I'm not being naughty, I really don't want to be the naughty person or not following rules, but I'm trying my hardest and I'm still getting everything wrong in your eyes. And it might just feel then that they're at a loss and they can never win. So then they might give up, and then they might think, well, if you're going to label me as naughty, I might as well be that way. And that frustration of being misunderstood is something that I saw so much in another student that I was a teacher of and form tutor linked to ADHD. She really struggled with the forgetting homework or forgetting resources, arriving late to lesson. And no matter how hard she tried, she would struggle with that. And she was really trying, and she felt sometimes really misunderstood by teachers, that they were getting frustrated with her, saying, you've forgotten your book again, you've turned up with no pen again, you haven't done your homework again. And then them thinking, oh, well, she's just blaming it on the ADHD. And it's impossible for you to be able to tell, is it someone blaming it on their ADHD, or is this genuinely their ADHD? So from my point of view, you should be giving people the benefit of the doubt and doing what you can to support them. And then having that understanding, they will feel more comfortable in your lessons. And that is the difference that I saw. This student, possibly as well because she knew me better because I was her form tutor, she didn't have the same issues of punctuality in the lesson. She was more willing to take part because she felt more comfortable in that lesson and she didn't feel misunderstood by me. So it goes a long, long way making a student aware that you understand and that you are aware that they're not doing it deliberately, and praising them for every little thing that is an improvement, so that you are showing, I know you're trying your best, I see it, I acknowledge it, and it's so good you've made this little improvement. So it's really important to think about the self-esteem and positive praise and support for the student. Now, as well as that, many students with ADHD are also incredibly creative and excel in lateral thinking tasks given the right support. And actually, a lot of entrepreneurs who have left the traditional 9-to-5 jobs and started their own online businesses have ADHD. And it's because of this creative ability and the lateral thinking that they are able to excel when they are their own boss without the strict routines that you might see in a typical 9-to-5 job. So it is worth bearing that in mind, that you could really help your students succeed if they are given the right support. So number 4 is strategies to support ADHD students. So we could think about first of all classroom adjustments. Could you look at your seating plan to position them somewhere in the class to minimize distraction? So not next to a window where they can look out at the playground and see a PE lesson, for example. Provide visual schedules and checklists to help them with organization. And you might remember last lesson I was talking about ASC, and I said that if you have a banner across your PowerPoints at the top saying every chunk activity you're doing in the lesson and highlight what you're currently doing, that sort of thing is a visual schedule of the lesson to help them stay on track. And if they do get distracted, well, they're then back in the zone, seeing where they're at. Also, allow movement breaks for students if they struggle to sit still. Number 2 is instructional strategies. So as we talked about, try breaking instructions and tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. You could also try using timers for tasks to provide a more visual structure of, you now have this long left. And that doesn't have to be a really obvious, you have a stop clock in front of you. You can get timers that you can embed in your PowerPoint, and that's going to help this student plus all students to be aware of how long they have left to go. And then also repeating instructions. So that could be verbally repeating what you're saying, also have it up on the board, also check, have they understood it? So repeat it. Once you talk to the class, just quickly pop over to the student, just check, do you know what you need to do? And maybe don't just have it as a closed yes or no question like that. Just ask them a question, check, right, where are you up in the instructions? Which bit are you up to, for you to be able to check, have they actually understood what they need to do and where to start? Number 3 then is behaviour support. And as I was saying, self-esteem can be really knocked by a student with ADHD in your traditional classroom. So make sure that you are using positive reinforcements and clear expectations as well, and avoid punishment-based systems where possible, and instead focus on encouraging doing when they have improved and give rewards instead to try and build up their self-esteem and feeling welcome in the classroom. And number 4 is homework help. Provide homework checklists, encourage students to start assignments in class. If you can use something like Satchel One or Show Your Homework, then parents are able to cross-reference as well and provide support at home. And like I said, if you do have larger projects or assignments, maybe set them mini deadlines along the way that you can check in with, so it's not just one huge task that they have to work out where to begin, what to do by themselves. So why does this all matter? Because yes, some of these things might be more work on your part, but research shows that students with ADHD are more likely to underperform academically and if not supported effectively. So early intervention can make a significant difference on their progress, their self-confidence, and therefore their overall school experience. And for me, that means it is worth the extra effort. Okay, so quick win of the week. Here is your quick win. Check out the website ADHD, which is spelled ADDITUDE, which I'll link below. It is packed with advice, teacher-friendly articles, and downloadable resources for understanding and supporting ADHD students in the classroom. So that is definitely one to check out and bookmark. Okay, so the resource roundup for this week is yet another one-page PDF freebie. This time it's all about ADHD. So this handy resource explains the condition, common challenges, and my top 10 strategies for creating an ADHD-friendly classroom. So the link to download that is in the show notes below. So that is it for this week, and that takes us to the end of this mini series on SEND. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Miss Estruch Teach and Tell. Remember, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of these episodes, where every week I give you a freebie to take away to help you with your teaching. If you have found this helpful, I would love to hear a review and a comment if you're watching on YouTube. So I'll see you next week. You bring the coffee and I'll bring the teach and tell.